Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully I've pressed all the right buttons and we are now live. So welcome to this learning burst with me, John Chisholm from Crescente Management Centre. The aim is for these to just be 15 minutes so you can grab a bit of time out your day for yourself, a little bit of personal development or professional development. In a room in our training course, I'm good at sticking to time, but with 15 minutes I've always got too much to say. So if I run on, I won't be disappointed if any of you disappear off sooner, but stick around if it goes on a bit. Okay, so over the last, so difficult conversations is what we're going to look at with a slant of sort of remote teams and remote managing. I, over the years, have been doing this nearly 20 years now, delivering training courses, and I'm rarely sat in an office with my colleagues. I don't have that experience really, sometimes, but generally not. So in fact, my teams usually involved people from at least two, maybe several other companies, suppliers and contributors doing bits, and then obviously the customer. So it's someone else's staff as well as someone else's workplace. I think there are advantages to difficult conversations remotely, and there are disadvantages too. So from my perspective, having reflected on this in preparation for this presentation, I think we want to maximize the advantages. And I think some of those are, if you're going to have a difficult conversation in a workplace and it's all got a bit kind of heated, let's say, then you need to try and calm down. So an advantage of remote doing these things remotely is if you get a little bit of feedback via email or something like that, you have got a little bit of time and space that you can control a little bit more. And so you don't have to avoid people as a result of the conversation in the workplace or something like that. You don't have to falsely pretend to sort of be not upset around your colleagues and that sort of thing. So and I'm sure there's plenty more, but there are advantages. And there are also many disadvantages as well to doing difficult conversations remotely. So I think we have to try a lot harder. The previous session was on trust and relationships from a month ago. I think that's still online, and you can go and have a look at that. So we have to try harder to build and maintain relationships, and that's about building and maintaining trust, I guess. So we have to reword. I find myself having to reword emails. You probably do anyway. But taking care exactly how that's going to go, and can we build rapport through emails, for example? And I think we can, but it needs a bit more work. Do we need to spend a little bit more time building that trust and that rapport over a Teams call or over the telephone or something like that, that would normally be conversations we would just have at work or in the office or in the, kind of whatever work environment you're in, shop floor or something like that. We don't see pictures on people's desks, or we don't have things to comment on about a person, I don't know what they're wearing or what they've done at the weekend or whatever. So where's all of that? Also, we don't know where the person is at personally in terms of their environment, their situation. We're having difficult conversations, and I'll come back to that. So essentially, I'm trying to sort of answer why have these conversations. So that's a little bit about advantages and disadvantages. I think relationships. So my basic kind of definition, which I've put on the screen, which hopefully you can read from there, says results through relationships. There's an old, that's a development of a very old definition of leadership, which essentially is task through relationship. So I've just kind of updated a little bit. And essentially, I think if we have strong relationships with teams and individuals, then we're going to be more efficient and more productive and have more morale and so on. And hopefully that's better for customers and better for staff. So I guess that's the kind of main reason why. Also, I think there's different ways of quantifying and looking at relationships and what we mean by that, and so starting to begin to think where things sort of go wrong, as it were. And by the way, this can be where things go right as well in terms of compliments and so on. But I'm going to focus on the kind of difficult conversations that most of us probably bring to mind when we listen to a session or come on a session like this. How important is the relationship? How important is it to the piece of work that we're doing right now? how trustworthy is that person, and how trustworthy are you in their mind? So there's a lot of subjective kind of views obviously going on. And then also there is the kind of credibility within that role. So I think the workplace brings some freedoms in terms of relationships, but it also brings some definite contractual, psychologically contractual, as well as actual employment contracts, sort of expectations and so on. So there's a reflection for me there about what's the kind of psychological contract, what is understood, what is implicit, and what is explicit, what is actually shared. So I think a lot can go wrong in all of that, but the focus is about how important this relationship is and getting it right. So my next little section is about, can you have difficult conversations? So a lot of the time I've been delivering this sort of session for, I don't know, God, 10 years or something, maybe more. There are some key barriers, and I've decided to sort of reflect on it all and summarize them again. So I think the reason why people avoid difficult conversations is, firstly, your personality. You're born with it, you are you. If you don't like upsetting people, or you don't like conflict or whatever, you're probably in the majority. That's kind of, I would guess, pro-social behavior, but actually it doesn't serve us very well sometimes when we have to or need to have that difficult conversation. So thinking that others are better than you, or that you're better than them, maybe. But actually that's your personality. And I guess really, to some degree that's fixed, although we can have a debate on that. The next main sort of areas of barriers for me, the reasons why you and I wouldn't have a conversation, kind of linked to your personality, is about the thinking. Okay. So I meet a lot of people who just don't have the conversation in the moment, because they don't kind of know how to, or they just can't get over that initial little hurdle of having the conversation. And I think rather than it being because you're scared or of a deeper sort of personal reason, actually it's just the fact that you've not got very good at it. So if you don't have that skill and ability, and you haven't practiced it, and you haven't got it wrong and got it right and so on, then you could work on your thinking. So if you're not so good at managing your thinking, you talk yourself out of it. These are smaller excuses than personality, but there is a real danger of descending into excuses here. The other one that I find quite interesting personally, working with groups for many, many years in person, is the kind of awkward embarrassment factor. I have it a bit, you have it a bit. It's a natural part of being a human being. But actually sometimes, for example, in a training course, when I've asked people a question and nobody answers, and maybe it's because they're bored of me, but maybe actually it's because people are reflecting and thinking about it. And you can see, I can always see in a group, through body language and so on, the 2 or 3 people out of 10, let's say, that have got awkward with the silence, they're kind of worried because somebody's not done an answer, and I'm not worried. I'm sat there going, okay, so I've asked you a question and you're honestly reflecting on it. So there's that kind of awkward embarrassment factor that people don't want, and I think that's a thinking thing, because I think we can get past that if it's not kind of massively ingrained for you. So they're often the areas that we work on, and there might be something that resonates in there for you in terms of something you can take away and develop. So the next bit of, can you have the conversation, for me, is your energy and your mood or the situation. So if you just can't face it right now because you're very tired, or you've got a lot of other stuff going on, or low energy levels, or the situation isn't right, then don't do it. Then that's not right. Actually, you're not going to give it your best, or it's going to go wrong. Then it probably is going to go wrong. So you're right to think about that way. But again, watch out for just making excuses for yourself. I reflected as well on a little bit of a ratio. So over the years, we've referred to this as courageous conversations, and various other kind of, attractive course titles, I guess. But courageous conversations is something that's been very, very popular, and I'll come back to it later on in the leadership and management section. But for me, for an individual, how much courage do you need? And I think if it's a personality thing and an energy levels and a thinking thing, then there's quite a lot to get over. Then you as an individual in that situation, for that person and that conversation, conversation might need quite a lot more sort of courage and might need to dig deeper than somebody actually that's completely comfortable with having those conversations, doesn't have to dig very deep at all. So maybe it's about how much you care, maybe it's not, I don't know. It kind of depends for you and the person, really depends on the relationship, and like I mentioned before, I guess the level of trust that's in there and so on, and I'll come back onto that in a second. So there's a kind of courage to give a damn sort of ratio, really. So how much courage do you need, and is it about how much you care? I don't know, I think. Next section, should you have the conversation? So that's, can you, should you? The most interesting bit of the conversation for me here is about your intentions and being honest with yourself about the conversation that you're going to have and the intention. So is it about saying how you feel? Is it about pointing out a problem or a mistake? You're working with somebody and they're doing it wrong and you want to kind of step in, but they're more senior than you, or you don't want to upset them or whatever, but then it's going to go further wrong if you don't step in. Then there's loads of reasons. Maybe you want to look smart, or you want to look sort of better or more superior than that person. That happens quite a lot. So be honest with yourself. What's the level of, like, what's your intention? Be honest. What is your intention? And you'll dress it up as something it's not. I see it and hear it all the time. So you think it's well intentioned and it'll be good for the person. It's like, yeah, is that you though, or is that honestly coming from them? Added to that then is how much ego or venom is there in it. And I think if you can reflect on that, is it all about you? Is it about drama? And also, so like how much you want to just sort of snap at a person, or it's just the first thing that you said or what have you, because you wanted to say it, so you said it. So it does need to be for the other person and it needs to be for you. I think it's about what's in the space in between that relationship for me. So is the conversation going to add or subtract? So how much trust is there in the relationship right now? Stephen Covey, I can't remember in what book, it might have been 7 Habits, it might have been Principles, Centered Leadership, one of them, talked about an emotional bank account. I quite like this idea, that simple analogy of how much trust there is in that relationship, essentially. And you're making little deposits, so you're adding money, you're adding trust and relationship, or is this conversation is usually going to be a withdrawal from that? You're going to kind of take some of the money out, some of the trust out, and actually that person's going to say things like, well, I don't like you now. You've upset me now, and they'll brush it off. But if you're getting that kind of response sometimes, and it is at that level, they've possibly taken the feedback, or they've engaged in the conversation, taken some ownership for themselves and so on, but actually it has had a bit of a dent in the relationship. If you make personal comments, or if you sort of just decide to say whatever you're saying without really thinking about it, then then you, and there's no, particularly if there's no trust there, then I think you can kind of permanently break relationships pretty quickly. So we do a lot of development with managers who are stepping up, and leaders and exec teams and so on. So people stepping into those leadership positions, and you've got to be able to start afresh then, and that's quite nice. But pick your battles, basically, and manage the situation as well. I'm just going to add to that, actually. I'm just checking my notes. And there's one thing I thought I would add during COVID times. We're talking during COVID about essential travel only. So people are working from home, and that's absolutely great. Obviously, it keeps people safer, and that's what we need to do. But I think if this is a really serious conversation that you need to have, that might actually represent essential travel. Seriously, if you need to be in a room together, then that's probably better. So please consider those sorts of things, whether it's with a colleague or a team member or a supplier or whatever. Okay, so I hope that is helpful. How do you have them? So there's obviously, you spend days looking at this sort of stuff. I think if you've done all that stuff in the last section, the reflective, should I even have this conversation now or should I not, then you've probably done quite a lot of empathy, and having done most of that, it'll probably go well anyway. So yeah, or go fairly well at least. Added to that, having the conversation, I think you should try and prevent the conversations, and by setting clear boundaries and expectations and having those in place and being able to reinforce those. For some people on a near daily basis, you're kind of saying the same things over again to make sure that they understand and they're in the right place and so on. So I think it's about having clear boundaries and expectations, and maybe kind of trying to minimize the confusion and the confusion in the first place. I think be prepared for people to be unreasonable. Sorry, everyone, but I think oftentimes we are a bit unreasonable because we don't like what we're hearing, or we're trying our best, or, you know, it's easy to justify ourselves and not like the feedback. So we are unreasonable sometimes. And I think it is amazing just how far people will go to gain attention or to not take ownership. That's the big one. And maybe to look superior or inferior or whatever. So I would suggest maybe, actually, I'm just going to add in here, it might be worth you taking notes and maybe encouraging the other person to take notes. Maybe that's going to work. It might be relevant if it's a team member and it's going to lead to some kind of performance issue or something like that. It's worth kind of trying to clarify. It can be useful to have an agenda as well. If there's 2 or 3 points that you can share with them before a conversation, and then it's just a bit more structured and you can stay a bit more focused on the tasks rather than the emotions. So people are quite gamesy sometimes. They play emotional kind of psychological games. What they're saying on the surface level is not the same as what's being said underneath. You know, like there's a kind of psychological level and then a communication surface social level. But what I think is worth looking out for, and this is a suggestion for everybody really, but also for managers, you know, if you've got team members and so on, is just to try and tune into, maybe as quickly as possible if that's important, patterns of behavior, however tricky or complex or straightforward or whatever a person may be. It's patterns of behavior, and again, in the workplace, that's much easier to become familiar with than remotely. So if you're managing people remotely now that you used to work in a workplace with, then that's probably going to be okay. But if you don't know them, if they're a new person and they're remote or something, which again is quite often my experience, then you just have to kind of gradually get to know where that person's coming from. Often that can be through emails or phone calls or a team meeting every month or whatever it may be. So I'm saying, rather than kind of give you prescribed techniques, that if you understand patterns, then you should be able to understand how each individual is kind of thinking and feeling, and, you know, what's important to them and how they take feedback. And then we should be able to have the conversations a bit better. So tune into the individuals. And timing is everything. So I think 2 things with timing. I could say more, but 2 things with timing. One is to let the emotion die down. If I'm quite a naturally sort of dramatic person, I'm kind of initially offended or surprised or, you know, upset or whatever the emotion may be. And, you know, 5 minutes later, I just don't feel like that anymore. It's fine. So just learn to manage your own emotion, but let it die down. So that's the first thing. But it might take you a day or 2. You might be really upset or offended by like a comment or some feedback or whatever, conversation or something. The second and the next bit with timing, though, is you need to have that conversation at the next possible opportunity. If you don't have it at the next possible opportunity, it's just weird. You can't have it after that. It's gone. It's done. You've let it go. You've let it go. Okay. With certain behaviors and certain conversations as well, with certain individuals, I'd kind of expect things to reoccur. So it might be a conversation that you're like, oh my goodness, like, have I got to have that conversation again? And the answer is yeah. A few other bits I think I would follow up. If you need to follow up, I think you should own what you're saying. I don't think it should be personal comments or, you know, you're the problem and you're this and you're that, all comes with a pointy finger. I think it should be I statements. So I'm not happy with, or I don't like, or I'm thought it was amazing when, or I really appreciated that you know, so you own it and try and encourage them to own their bit in it as well. I would expect people, usually when you have a difficult conversation with somebody, the person knows, and they're kind of struggling with it a little bit as well themselves. And weirdly, I would most of the time expect somebody to kind of acknowledge their part in it, that it's a mistake or they've done wrong or whatever it may be, and we can actually pick it up and learn from it. People appreciate it as long as you do it in the right way, and as long as you've done some of these kind of things that I'm suggesting during the session. So get good at them. This is part of that thinking and skills base. Get good at having these conversations. People that I've spoken to who were terrible at them, and then gradually over the course of, for example, the programs we run or their own development that they do, they never enjoy them. They get good at them, but they never end up enjoying them. So please don't think you'll ever have don't have fun with like a difficult conversation or enjoy it. It's probably never going to get there. But do get good at having them. But you have to do it and get it wrong and then get it right. And then it's a skill. It's a set of skills, really. I think it can be useful to pre-frame. I'm just going to throw in there that I haven't put in my notes, but it's useful to pre-frame conversations and avoid any surprises. So if it's a particularly difficult conversation, then give the person a little bit of notice about what it might be about. Can we have a chat about your work on X piece of work or project or whatever it may be? So please give people a chance. Don't just sort of land stuff on their head as a surprise. Surprise. The key bit in all of that as well, which is back further up in my notes on that section, is about support. So please, the key thing, the main worry for me, which I think I already mentioned, is you don't know where that person is if they're at home. You don't know if they're homeschooling or they've got family members or they've got kind of whatever other difficult circumstances that sure, they're working from home, they should be able to manage that, but actually we just need to make sure people are okay. Like you want to keep the feedback based on work rather than emotions, and also make sure that you're supporting the person. And that leads into my sort of final section, which is considerations for leaders and managers. And I suppose that's kind of, it all is, but that's one of them particularly. So please make sure people are okay. If you did this stuff at work, you would be at work and you would take them off into a room, or you would go for a walk, or you would, like there's a process and people go, ooh, like they know what's coming. But at home, if you're working from home, people don't necessarily know that. So I think actually, please, please, please be careful and respectful and cautious and patient and kind. Considerations for managers. Nip it in the bud. If it's a small thing and you can have that conversation and you're likely to have the conversation ongoing, have the conversation ongoing. Don't kind of forget it or leave it. As soon as you leave it, the next time it's bigger. And the more there's an interesting curve actually. Avoidance curve from psychotherapy, where the more you avoid it, the more emotion there is each time. So if you've avoided something a few times with somebody, then you're really, really unlikely to talk to them about it. And the problem you're all going to face now, having spent all this time, way more than 15 minutes, on this session, is that you've been on a course now. So you're probably going to go and have to sort of try this stuff out. And then people will be like, oh, been on a course, have we? And like a set of skills looking for a situation then. So you've probably got into your leadership and management job because you're all right-ish at having difficult conversations, or you're amazing at work, or you hire brilliant people, or you just suffer and do more of the work yourself or whatever. So you're probably okay with it, but try and keep the conversations small. Don't let things kind of blow up. And if things do blow up, you're going to have to deal with them. Leadership, I keep telling people this on leadership programs. Leadership is the horrible end of this sort of stuff. It's hard work. It's difficult conversations. It's arriving first and leaving last. There's nothing nice about it. I don't know why anybody bothers, but we do it because we can, I guess. And it's important, and people appreciate it when you get it right. So I think you should, as a leader and manager, you should assume that you've forgotten exactly how much power you have. Please think about power. You think you're lovely, but actually other people around you might be really intimidated by you or really hurt by a comment from you. Whereas if in a different power dynamic, they wouldn't be too bothered. So please, please think about the power that you actually bring. It's an unequal power if you're a manager or a leader, isn't it? So actually you've got control over yourself and them and their work and the projects and the flow of the work and all that. So please just kind of bear that in mind when you go into these sorts of conversations, particularly if they relate to performance. What else have we got? Last point for you then. If you're looking for a challenge, and I've done some work with willful blindness. So there's a woman called Margaret Heffernan and another chap called Matthew Syed, who've written some brilliant books. So willful blindness and black box thinking and those sorts of things from a few years ago now around organizational culture and courageous conversations. So if you want to take this stuff to the next level as a leader or manager, if you're okay or good at having these kind of conversations, they could be about praising people and encouraging them, as well as having the difficult, the kind of solving the problems with people, is to encourage and role model it and support other people to develop the skill of being able to do this stuff for themselves. The impact of not doing it and the impact of doing that are the subjects of those books that I mentioned. So Margaret Heffernan, I can put it in the comments, hoping that the comments are on this time. I'll put it in the comments below if I can, and if not, you can email me and I'll send you the links. But they're very, very powerful and quite difficult reads at times, and it's about creating cultures where people and teams get past that conflict stage of team working. More on teams and leadership and so on another time. That's it. I knew I would run over. I can't cover it any more succinctly than that. It's such a big topic, and it's a really, really interesting topic, and it's a great one for a training day. So thanks for taking part and for watching. Obviously, if you've had to go, or if you want to re-watch it, it'll be on YouTube. Next time, in exactly 4 weeks from today, I'm going to kind of carry on, but look at conversations specific to appraisals or performance reviews or whatever you might call them, performance development reviews or job reviews or whatever it may be. So we're going to bring some of that into it. And also the difficult conversation stuff, I tend to get called into a lot of companies to do team development, so facilitating team improvements, usually around this sort of stuff where teams have normed or got stuck in like a everlasting sort of conflict phase with themselves and don't ever seem to get to performance. So we'll probably have a session on that at some point, but that is something we can do and help you with at work. So that's it. Thanks very much. We've got the social media links, and please follow along, and please get in touch and share this and share the invites for next time if you found it useful. So thank you very much. Cheers.